Chapter 37, More Questions. I still don't understand the information in your test questions because some answers concerning the Earth as the universe seem contradictory to my understanding. I'm hoping to get clarification if possible. If the universe is bigger than the solar system, and the law is, as above, so below, how can the Earth be a mini universe, an electron, when it's smaller than the solar system, an atom? I was doing well understanding the science, but you got me confused here. I really like the teaching that the lower life forms evolved from the Black woman and man and not the reverse. Makes sense to me as science says reactions flow from high to low. And as a scientist, I have always thought to myself that the current dogma may be totally backward. I'm learning a lot.
On the question of the Earth being a mini universe, think of it this way. As you know, being yourself a biological scientist, organisms are made of cells. The cell in biology is equivalent to the atom in physics and the solar system in astronomy. All of them have a central nucleus surrounded by other components. Many cells unite together to form larger organs until, in our case, the entire human body is complete. Similarly, solar systems unite to form the entire universe, and atoms unite in the same way to form the Earth. So atoms are exactly the same in function as solar systems and cells. All these three many components, cells, atoms, and solar systems, consider themselves, and proudly so, to be part of a larger universal being. In the case of our cells, their universal being is the human body. In the case of solar systems, theirs is the entire universe. What then is in it in the case of atoms? Their universe is the Earth. So the human body is a micro universe, the Earth is a mini universe, and the universe is the prototype after which the other two model themselves. You can go further down and consider that electrons orbit their nucleus the same way the Earth orbits the sun. So electrons are equivalent to the Earth in our nano universes and so on down to infinity. Now, it's a fact that before our universe was created, there was another universe before it, much smaller. That universe was actually the Earth, and its stars were the atoms that make up the Earth. The people who lived in it, our most remote ancestors, were microscopic in size. This doesn't mean they were microscopic in actuality, but if we could see them with our present eyes, they would appear small, living on Earth the size of electrons, because the present universe did not yet exist. There were no people our size to see them as being small. To them, their universe was as normal as a size as ours is to us. Similarly, when our universe attains its purpose and comes to an end, it will become an Earth for the next universe. Our stars, which seem so incomprehensibly large now, will be reduced to the size of atoms by the expansion of our minds and will become the atoms of that new Earth. After our minds have expanded to the new boundary, then we will create new bodies for ourselves that are as much larger than our present bodies as our present bodies are larger than atoms and our electrons and our remote ancestors who lived on them. As you can see, size is relative. It depends solely on the expansion of consciousness.
Please keep writing as I am interested to learn more about the 1,000,000,008,000,000 black gods. The non-black races desire to kill us so we don't reach that sacred number in hopes of prolonging their reign. I'm still undoing much damage to my psyche that has been done over the years. Yet, I realize I don't hate the non-black races, and actually know a few white people who sincerely hate the wickedness committed by these people. These few people speak out against and work against this corruption when they can. Yet I still realize we as Black people are different. We seem able, if we search diligently, to access a connection to the divine that is unavailable to the other races. Besides, I read a simple equation the other day that stated A equals the Black woman and man, and B equals foundation, and C equals the Almighty. Since A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. This brother hence concluded that the Black woman and man is the supreme being, the origin of everything. Your teachings confirm and support this view too. I was especially drawn when I first saw your recent post a few days ago when you acknowledged Black people of diaspora as the true Israelites. You also acknowledge the oppression, especially of women, associated with the laws in the Torah, which is also a sore spot for me. I finally realized through the study that the religious practices attributed to Israel are likely due to significant Babylonian and Persian influences and are not the commands as handed down to Israel by Yah. I also like that you pointed out that Moses gave Israel the Ten Commandments, which to me seem a good set of rules for living. Importantly, too, it seems from your teachings, I don't have a better word to call them, that Yah and the Elohim have physical bodies, as do all the 1,000,000,008 gods, which also fits since from reading the Old Testament, I know that Israel saw Yah as a man, as claimed by the prophets Isaiah, Ezekiel, Amos, and by Daniel, to name a few. Ezekiel made his vision of Yah as a man plain in Ezekiel chapter 1. Similarly, the Elohim, like Michael and Gabriel, were seen as men. This vision of Yah as having the appearance of a human in the Old Testament fits with your explanation of Yah and the Elohim and the creation of people on this earth and adds more to my understanding of how we Africans of the diaspora are the people of Yah. I do have questions about the true religion of Yah or Yahweh, and should I be practicing it? Many Israelites who know they are the descendants from the Israel expect Yah to deliver us back to the land of Israel in the Middle East if they keep the commandments as written in the Old Testament, oppressive though they are. I figure there is something better than to return to that bloodstained place. It can be found by reestablishing my connection to Yah through knowing myself. In Kemet, the people say, "Know thyself, and you will know the gods." Because we are the gods?
You're right that the non-Black races will resort to anything within their power to try and prolong their rule of the earth, but they will not succeed. Their time is up, simple as that. The God of this age has protected them for 6,000 years so they could live for their allotted time. Otherwise, Black people would have destroyed them long ago. But now they've reached the end of God's mercy as far as their existence on earth. There is nothing they can do about it. Soon their power, which depends on guns and bombs, will be taken away. Yahweh's angels, the Elohim, visited their descendants, your ancestors, before they were enslaved, many times in the past. With each visit, the circumstances were different, deteriorating for the most part as the centuries rolled on. In order to preserve the Israelites, Yahweh, through his angels and prophets, added sterner commands to the fundamental laws first given to Moses. This was necessary then to ensure that the people would survive, no matter how dire the circumstances got or how oppressive their enemies became. Since the woman is the cradle of society, it's understandable why some of the rules directed at women were so strict. It's one thing for men to break the rules of morality, especially sexual morality, but it's detrimental to the entire nation when women do the same. Of course, the ideal situation is for both men and women to obey the laws designed to safeguard the nation's survival, but it's imperative for women to be the last one standing if it comes to that. That's the reason behind the stricter laws directed at the mothers, sisters, and daughters of the nation. Now, people being what they are in the state of self forgetfulness, especially men, they couldn't resist the temptation to use these laws against women. Having imitated our enemies for thousands of years, they fell into the trap of using these very same laws to oppress women instead of cooperating with them to lighten their burden of being their preservers of the nation. Today, people are much more enlightened, and men and women understand one another and communicate much better than in the past centuries of this age. So, fair minded, intelligent people should understand why the rules were stricter towards women in the past, but they should not continue this oppression today, when circumstances are so different and people are much more open minded. The religion of Yahweh should not be fossilized as if every rule is carved in stone. There are some rules that always apply, but others were given according to the prevailing circumstances of their time. In practicing Yahweh's religion, fair minded people should use flexible judgment by following their conscience. They can know without doubt which rules are to be obeyed to the letter and which are to be adjusted to suit modern times. That's how Yahweh intended for the people to practice his religion. He did not intend for them to become semi robotic and take every word literally, even when circumstances dictate otherwise. Yahweh's people will return to Israel, but at that time, the Jews and Arabs who live there will vacate that land. All the blood they've spilled, they will atone for it in many ways, which they'll be directed to do in order to restore the earth and its spirit to the former natural balanced condition. Israel is going to be the headquarters or capital of the world, from where the true Israelites will govern the whole world. The non-black races will receive their instructions from there concerning what to do to restore everything they've corrupted. The earth has 12 primary nodes of energy transmission. Israel and Palestine and that entire area of the Middle East is the foremost nodal point in this age, from which the Earth's healing energies will be directed. So, in the coming years, many Black people of slave descent will relocate there. They'll turn that desert into fertile greenery, after which more people will follow to live in that area.
I'm sorry that I'm slow. I was born before March 1961, but I'm having trouble understanding how, as described under Blackroots Science 18 mathematics, 3 divides to become 7. I understand how 1 becomes 2 and 2 becomes 3, father, mother, child, for example, but I get lost in understanding how 3 becomes 7 and 7 become 12.
The first three divisions are when God incarnates as people. God is unity or one. Then God divides into soulmates, men and women, or two. Then the soulmates become three when a child is born. Those are the divisions of persons. Next come the divisions of creation. First come people, then people create the universe or nature. So the next division from 3 to 7 is a division of how the three persons create nature. The three people, man, woman, and child, are called the Holy Trinity. On the highest level, they are represented by the three groups of leaders, the elders, chiefs, and judges. You can think of the elders as representing man, the chiefs, woman, and the judges as representing child in a patriarchal society. In a matriarchal society, when the earth is ruled by a queen, then you can think of the elders representing women and the chiefs, man. So we have one, two, three or man, woman, and child, but we also have one, two, three as elders, chiefs, and judges as far as creating is concerned. They are the primary leaders in creation, and the fact that there are three groups creating results in 7 creations or 7 versions of things, such as colors. The reason is as follows. All three groups can create independently, which they do, but they can also create in collaboration, which they also do. How many creations will there be if they create independently? There'll be 3 because there are 3 groups. How many more if they collaborate? There will be 4 more because there are only 4 ways in which they can collaborate. Think of your husband as representing the elders, yourself as representing the chiefs, and let's say you have a child representing the judges. Your husband can create all by himself. That's one independent creation. You can also create all by yourself. That's the second creation. Your son or daughter can also create by him or herself. That's the third type. So there are 3 independent creations. Then you all decide to collaborate. First is your husband collaborating with you. That's the fourth type of creation. Then he collaborates with your son to make the fifth type. Then you collaborate with your son to make the sixth type. Then all 3 of you work together to make the seventh and final type. That's all of the combinations possible. That's why there are 7 colors in the rainbow and 7 tones in music. As far as the number 12, you'll have to read the section again where I make a comparison with 12 spheres surrounding one sphere. This is also a natural limit, so the number of tribes of the Black nation cannot exceed 12.
For those Black people like myself born before March 1961, our 10 inactive strands of DNA will thus stay inactive, if I read and understand installment 15 of The Chosen People of Yahweh correctly. Will the exercises really help us? Not trying to be difficult, just trying to understand. Maybe I have more difficulty understanding because I have only 2 active DNA strands. That's okay. It just is what it is.
You can reactivate your DNA. In people born after March equinox of 1961, the reactivation started spontaneously. But in other people, it can be reactivated by their own effort. The memory exercises of level 2 are meant to do precisely this. The mind and body are linked. When you gain control of your mind, your body cannot help but respond accordingly. It will increase its ability to perceive by reactivating all your glands, the so called chakras, as well as reactivating the lost strands of DNA.
Okay, I get that the exercises will help to activate my inactive strands of DNA. What is more difficult to comprehend is if the 10 inactive strands are spontaneously reactivated in Black people born after 1961, why are so many young people still following the old ways to glorify sex and violence? Why does the reaction spontaneously occur in those born after March 1961? My nephew was born after 1961, but he still died of a brain tumor. Wouldn't having his 10 inactive strands spontaneously activated make him stronger? I'm just trying to understand. I read in Blackroots that sickness is due to a character flaw. If sickness is due to a character flaw, then why is the world still terrorized by healthy but hateful white men of the ruling elite? Their characters are not flawed. My understanding is that reactivating my 10 strands of DNA will allow me to begin answering these questions myself. I can link that which is within me. I hope so.
I'll answer your second question first. Why does the reaction spontaneously occur in those born after March 1961? The human entity, body, and mind goes through 7 stages to reach completeness. After birth, the body takes 7 years to leave the stage of infancy or proper childhood, then another 7 years to reach puberty. Then it reaches adulthood or maturity at 21. At 28, it reaches dietary or metabolic maturity. At 35, the person reaches emotional maturity and then mental maturity at 42. The 6 stages then coalesce over the next 7 years until they form a complete, unified person at age 49. That's the ideal situation, where the person is nurtured and supported by an enlightened community using proper rituals. What happens to the individual also happens to the subconscious mind or the spirit of the entire Black nation. After a spiritual seed has been planted in the nation's subconscious, it also goes through the 7 stages to reach completeness. These are equivalent to the physical stages like infancy, puberty, etc., but on a spiritual level. Each spiritual stage also lasts for 7 years. In 1911, the seed was planted whereby a Messiah would come and reclaim the 10 lost tribes of Israel. It germinated and was born into reality exactly as happens with the conception of a baby. The birth of this idea happened in 1912 when Fard Muhammad was introduced to the elders of all the tribes as the Messiah who would go on this mission. He was formally told of his mission 9 months earlier in 1911. From that date, for the following 49 years, the Messianic mission went through 7 stages until it reached completeness on the summer solstice in 1960. So from its conception in June 1911 until June 1960 is 49 years. From its birth 9 months later in March 1912 until March 1961 is also 49 years. All this took place on the spiritual level, or rather in the subconscious minds of the Black nation. As soon as it reached maturity, those children conceived on or after the day of the solstice in June 1960 and born about 9 months later on the day of the equinox in March 1961. The spiritual seed was born into physical manifestation in their bodies. The result was a genetic reverse mutation that began the reactivation of their DNA.
Why are so many young people still lost morally and others dying of brain tumors, etc., when they're supposed to be genetically stronger?
Just like any seed planted, it must be nurtured. If a seed is planted in good soil but is never watered and is denied sunlight, it will never sprout, let alone flower. We don't have an enlightened community of dedicated Black people who can guide our youth. They're genetically and mentally ready to be guided, but there's no one to guide them.
Why are there healthy white men ruling and terrorizing the world when they're supposed to be unhealthy due to their moral bankruptcy?
They are not healthy. They are very sick. They are propped up, walking chemical cauldrons supported by artificial medicines, or drugs as they call them. They admit in themselves in their biographies that some of them exist on upwards of 100 pills per day. One influential American talk show host, elitist, admitted to spending thousands of dollars a month on his prop up supplies. He used to send his maids into dark alleys in the middle of the night to get his drugs. If these chemicals could be taken from them, they'd fall apart and disintegrate. They're very unhealthy precisely because of their moral bankruptcy. This doesn't mean that Black people who also depend on these chemical poisons and suffer the same kinds of diseases are as morally bankrupt. The reason they suffer is because they are not yet ready to get rid of their sympathy for white people. They attract their diseases to themselves just like a dog will get the diseases of its owner. The dog has unconditional sympathy with its owner's system of life and accepts all the vibrations that come from him, including his illnesses. We live in a world of resonance fueled by sympathy. As long as Black people have love or sympathy for their white system, they'll suffer all its emanations, good and bad, and take them upon themselves by the law of sympathetic resonance. That's why we need a minimum of 144,000 people today who are willing to give up all love and sympathy for the non-Black races so we can dedicate ourselves fully to our inevitable destiny, which is to retake control of the world. That's the only way we can put to good use what nature has prepared in the bodies and minds of our youth.
Thanks for answering, but of course, this only leads to more questions. I'm sure you are bombarded with plenty of them. Why is Fard Muhammad considered the Messiah when he is not the first to proclaim that Black people in America are descended from the lost tribes of Israel? Clearly, other Black people knew of their Israelite identity and taught other Israelites this truth prior to Fard Muhammad appearing. The 10 lost tribes? All 12 tribes are lost. If only 10 tribes were lost, where are the other 2 tribes? According to biblical history, Yehuda and Levite primarily were the last to be scattered. Yehuda endured the Babylonian captivity, which was ended when the Persians conquered the Babylonians. Also, the Torah was written by Ezra after the Babylonian captivity when Yehuda was under Persian rule. By this time, the 10 tribes supposedly had been long scattered when taken into captivity under the Assyrians. In fact, Joshua, some call Jesus, was supposedly a member of the tribe of Yehuda, although if one reads carefully, he actually is a Levite, who also claimed in the book of Luke that Israel would be led captive into the nations. Yehuda was scattered after the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. Why is Fard Muhammad considered the Messiah when he is not the first to proclaim?
To be the seventh Messiah, Var did not have to be the first to proclaim. It was his destiny. Destiny does not go by who's first, as common sense will tell you. As part of his destiny, it was his mission to organize the Israelites into a coherent group. Now, he used the later of Islam to do this because that's the one he grew up in. As it turns out, that was the best way to do it, as history has shown by the success of the Nation of Islam during the times of Elijah. The choice of religions that any Black person makes today is a personal matter. It doesn't concern Yahweh at all whether his people come to him through Islam or Israel or even Christianity. Islam and Israel are identical. Both religions come from Yahweh. Don't make the mistake of rejecting what Farr did because of the bad things you may have heard about him. Wait till the truth is revealed to you as direct knowledge through your inner self. Then you can make a wise decision. Otherwise, you'll fall into the trap of divide and conquer laid for us by those who want to separate us.
The 10 lost tribes? All 12 tribes are lost. If only 10 tribes were lost, where are the other 2 tribes?
One is the Gara and Dogon people of Mali and Burkina Faso. The other is spread along the east coast of Africa from Sudan to South Africa. These 2 tribes were never conquered by whites and never enslaved, so they are not lost and never were. They still practice the original religion as Yahweh gave it to them and obey his commandments.
If the adults are not enlightened and don't care to be, what do we do?
We become enlightened ourselves and take charge. The world is in need of at least 144,000 enlightened Black people to take charge of our inevitable destiny, which is to regain control of the world. That's our immediate goal as the white man system self destructs right before our eyes. Many people are working towards this from different directions, and we need to do our part also.
Greetings, warrior. I always say that religion is different than spirituality. May I humbly, from the depths of my being, ask you, as you mentioned, the true Israelites, right? Why not African peoples? Just a thought. It sounds like the Israelite nation here in Toronto. I do love all your information, bro. I did attend one time the Israelite nation meeting and sounded cultish in many ways. I am open to new concepts and ideas because the human mind is always evolving, and I practice the spirituality of my ancestors in Africa. If you have any reference material on the Dogons in Africa, I will greatly appreciate that. They have a great and vast knowledge of the cosmos.
The word Israelite has been used and abused badly, especially by the whites in Israel, the Jews who consider themselves Israelites, which is not true. Others have begun cults based on this idea and so forth. You may or may not be aware of this, but the British monarchy is involved in a centuries old cult where they claim they are the lost tribes of Israel. And so Black people started their Israelite cults also, which you may find offensive. But the historical facts behind this name don't change. History remains the same regardless of how people try to distort it. The true Israelites are Black people of slave descent. They descended from Yahweh and the Elohim, the 60,000 Black people who settled on the island 6,000 years ago and bred the light skinned races. Their descendants here in the Americas and elsewhere have intermarried with non Israelite Africans. So today, practically all Black people of slave descent are Israelites, related to the 60,000 ancestors in one way or another. But they're still Africans. That's where they were enslaved from. Their Israelite heritage is noted and registered in Yahweh's book of life for the sake of the future of all Black people, because the Israelites are going to become the new rulers of the world when the present system self destructs. I'm not trying to take away from their Africanness. I'm simply singling them out as the most important people in this 6,000-year age.
I've been pondering this for a while. A large proportion of people in the world are a mixed product of Black people and other races. Now, due to the natural dominance of the Black gene, most of these people have the Black gene, strongly exhibit the presence of melanin, and have some features that reveal their Black ancestry. Now, because these people have the dominant Black gene and are therefore genetically Black, their temple should contain the throne of God in which he and she can sit. However, just because these mixed people have the Black gene doesn't mean any of the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods are incarnated in them, or does it? Also, when the world's population was much less than it is now, and the Black population likewise, did the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods incarnate in Black people who were less than obviously or visibly Black? Example being the Honorable Fard Muhammad. If that is so, then that could mean that even now there are still Black people who are not visibly Black due to miscegenation, albinism, etc., but yet are incarnations of the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods, other than Yahweh. A large proportion of people in the world are a mixed product of Black people and other races.
That is true.
Now, due to the natural dominance of the Black gene, most of these people have the Black gene. Now, because these people have the dominant Black gene and are therefore genetically Black, their temple should contain the throne of God in which he or she can sit.
That is not true. Most of these people have some mixture of Black blood in them, but they don't have the Black gene. The Black gene is not the same thing as melanin. The dominant Black gene, the seed of God, is actually the dark reproductive gene found in Black people only. As I've said before, Black people have both the dominant Black gene and the recessive light gene. Most of the mixed races that you mentioned are attenuated beyond the seventh generation, where the Black gene of procreation has been completely removed. In other words, most of them cannot give birth to a Black child, the same as whites cannot. They still have some melanin, but all people on Earth have some melanin, including whites.
About the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods, does that mean of the 6.5 plus billion human beings on Earth, only 1,000,008,000,000 are incarnate gods? Are the 1,000,008,000,000 purely Black people? If that is so, then that means that there can only be a maximum number of 1,000,008,000,000 purely Black people on Earth. What of the rest of the 5 billion plus humans, many of which are mixed Black people? Are these exclusively incarnations of Yahweh and the Elohim, or do the other gods incarnate in them as well? What of the beings that totally lack the throne of God, the purely white people? I assume these are all definitively exclusive figments of the mind of Yahweh.
There are only 1,008,000,000 Black people on Earth. All of them have the Black germ or the throne of God, so each one is an incarnation of one of the 1,008,000,000 gods. The rest are non Blacks. They don't have the throne of God in them. They have what is called a group soul, which is a part of Yahweh's mind that they call their collective unconscious or their collective mind. Now, the 1,008,000,000 Black people on Earth, such as you and me, are not pure. The only pure Black people on Earth are the 24 elders and the 144 chiefs who never lost their original 12 DNA. We'll become pure again when we regain our inactive DNA. Let's look at the population figures and you'll see that the actual number of Black people does not exceed 1,008,000,000. Africa, about 790 million total. Of these, about 140 million are North African Arabs. That leaves about 650 million Black Africans. Subtract that from 1,008,000,000. That leaves about 358 million blacks outside Africa. Brazil has the next largest population of people of African descent, about 60 million. Subtract that. That leaves about 298 million. Subtract 36 million African Americans and about 12 million other blacks in the Americas, and that leaves 250 million. Of these 250 million, most are in India, about 160 million. That leaves about 90 to 100 million other blacks. That's a large number, and they're spread all over the world in Europe, Asia, many there, and Australia, etc. It accounts for all the other mixed race black people you mentioned. So over 5 billion people on Earth are non-black. Many of them are melanated in all shades of medium to very light brown, all the way to yellow and white, but none of them have the black procreative gene. They simply cannot give birth to a black child by themselves unless they procreate with a black person. In ancient times, 3, 4, or 5,000 years ago, the gods did not all incarnate at once. They took turns. Some gods would incarnate in one generation, then another group of gods would incarnate in the following generations, and so on, until the black population increased where all the gods can incarnate at the same time. Black people like Fard actually have the black gene. There are very light skinned black mulattoes like that if one of the parents was black.
Are there other beings existing on Earth?
Yes, there are many different kinds of beings that have been created by the gods over the ages. Some of them exist here on Earth, others in the rest of the universe, as well as in non-physical realms, but none of them are evil. This is the first time that such beings have been created. Their evil minds have also spawned other worldly or supernatural creatures that haunt, scare, and otherwise intrude in people's lives, but all of them are psychic manifestations, such as ghosts, vampires, etc. They will all cease to exist at the end of this age when white people come to their end.
Since our race permeate the universe and our destiny to fully comprehend, encompass, and finally transcend it, there are others like us on many other planets. Do our kindred come to us from their habitations in space and vice versa? Also, are we the only Black nation in the entire universe that are experiencing evil at this time cycle? If not, or if so, are there other planetary colonies of our cosmic brothers and sisters going through different or similar cycles to us? Do our kindred come to us here on Earth?
They used to come openly before Christianity came into being. There are numberless stories of them visiting the earth written in ancient texts, including the Bible. They are reported as coming in clouds, chariots of fire, etc. All these refer to interstellar spaceships. Christianity made it difficult for people to continue reporting the visits of gods and angels because they started persecuting people, saying such visits are demonic. So the gods stopped coming openly, but they still come to select individuals or remote tribes. Soon they'll begin to come again openly, led by Yahweh and his angels.
Also, are we the only Black nation in the entire universe that are experiencing evil at this time cycle? If not, or if so, are the other planetary colonies of our cosmic brothers and sisters going through different or similar cycles to us?
Our Earth is the only place where the non-black races were made. So we're the only ones going through this experience. But all black people unite through rituals, so all other black people in the universe will know about evil exactly as we know it. The gods that are incarnated here as us are also the same gods incarnated all over the universe. The nature of black people throughout the universe is to share experiences through unity. So all souls in the universe know or will know the experience of evil.
If, as you say, the requirement for the 144,000 is to possess the Black gene, to have a complete non sympathy for the Black race and a total lack of sympathy for the white races, then surely the current number of individuals has exceeded that number. If not, then it must surely already have been reached. How fitting that the 144,000 represent and personify the 144,000 aspects of the character of God.
The 144,000 are potentially all here, but we must organize and remove ourselves from dependence on the present system. We must start a new type of community that's totally independent where the whites can't touch us. But first we must recover our memories and get out of our self-forgetfulness.
The students of the Nubian nation that I've spoken with seem to say that there are other requirements for the 144,000. Three of which is the ability to speak the Nuabic language, the ability to practice Winuubu, right knowledge, right wisdom, and right overstanding, and the ability to teach the former two. Do you agree with him?
Yes, I agree. The most important is the practice of the Bonobabo, Wunuwubu. It's the gateway to the rest. The second level of Blackroot science is precisely about that. By gaining control of our memories, we'll come in contact with our first ancestor. That's the key to understanding knowledge and wisdom. He and she will teach us the ancient language. You already know the original language, but it's buried deep in your subconscious memories. After you can complete the second level, your very likely feel a strong desire to teach others. That's how the number will increase quickly.
Would you consider yourself one of the 144,000? I suspect you are.
Only if you consider yourself one also. By myself, I'm only one. Together with the others we'll reach 144,000.
I find it ironic that the white races plan to do the battle with that deity Yakub when he finally reveals himself to them in the world. How can the personalities of a mind hope to combat the entirety of that mind? It would be like me trying to fight and conquer my first self, vainly, foolishly, and hopelessly impossible.
True.
I want to ask you a question on Elijah Muhammad. Why do you say he succeeded in his mission far beyond his wildest dreams? Is the success of his mission linked to the mission of Malachi York and his Nubian nation? I suspect it is because I'm sure there were far more to Elijah's task than establishing the Nation of Islam, which to all experiences presently looks like a defunct and floundering organization.
Think of all the offshoots that came out of his work. All the gods that build together today, from the Nubians to the five percenters to all the rap artists and the other ordinary people who know that the black man is God. All that is the result of his ministry, and it's spreading all over the world where there are black people to be found.
Also, are there remnants of the extraterrestrial creatures of the non black races, the insectoids, reptilian, mammalian, aliens, still existing outside of this planet, or other planets, star systems, etc.? Or have they all been compelled back to the Earth? What of the non black races themselves? Are they even capable of escaping the confines of this planet, especially in this day and time?
They haven't all been compelled to the Earth. All the extraterrestrials still live on their planets in different places in the galaxy. The ones that are here are astronauts, scientists, geneticists, linguists, etc. They're sent by their people on a mission and they go back and forth between Earth and their homes.
I would like to ask you your thoughts on the seeming Messiah that was promised, Yahweh Ben Yahweh. I'm only recently coming into knowledge of Yahweh Ben Yahweh and his organization, so I don't know much about them as yet. But from what I'm reading from their writings and their journey, they seem to be the one thing I've been searching for. Hebrew Israelites that have remembered and retaken their heritage, and having done that, are taking the important step of moving out from the place of their captivity to their place of redemption, which is their ancient homeland.
Are you strong enough to join such a group as an independent mind and not a follower? If yes, then I would encourage you to indeed ally yourself with this or other Black Hebrew Israelite organizations. You may get the opportunity to learn, as well as gain and contribute to the atmosphere of Black brotherhood that exists in some of them. There are several such organizations, as you probably know. One of the more serious ones, called Black Hebrews, already has members living permanently in Dimona, Israel. This is only the beginning of the return of Yahweh's people back to the land of their ancestors. On the other hand, if you're not strong enough to resist the charisma of the leaders of some of the organizations, then you could find yourself trapped as a cult follower rather than a leader. We are now at the end of this 6,000-year cycle where the time for following is over. It is now the time for leading. 144,000 Black people are needed now who will take this leadership role and open the way for all Black people to be free. Black people are not followers by nature, as each one is an independent God in reality. These 144,000 will eventually open the way for the establishment of the new society, or rather return to the ancient and eternal society. where each God incarnates on earth not to follow but to create, and each one uniquely.
I have seen satellite images of what appear to be impressive spaceships currently orbiting the sun. They seem to be doing something to the sun. Most likely, they are increasing its power to put the heat on the non black races on the surface of the earth, which is the reason why the non black races are currently shooting missiles into space, aiming at the sun or the Elohim themselves, or both. Foolish creatures. To see this, go to these web pages below.
As for the spaceships around the sun, the Elohim are involved in a process that will eventually result in the removal of oxygen from the earth. You may know that oxygen is necessary for combustion to take place. That means guns, bombs, even automobile engines, internal combustion engines cannot function without oxygen, neither can a fire be lit. When they complete this mission, all YT's weapons, guns, bombs, missiles, torpedoes, nukes, etc., will become useless, as well as the rest of his technology because it all depends on combustion of oxygen. They will substitute the oxygen with the form of ozone. There will be a new type of air for breathing made for of this form of ozone. All this requires certain adjustments of the sun's magnetic field in its relation to the Earth's atmosphere. That's why Nibiru, so-called 12th planet, is now parked between the Earth and the Sun, where it cannot be seen due to the sun's glare. The primary reason for replacing the oxygen with the higher form is not to neutralize Whitey's weapons. That's just a side benefit. The real reason is because the new kinds of bodies that will survive on Earth, which will be similar to our ancient bodies, will need it for breathing.
Peace, brother. I have been reading your lessons online for the past 3 months, and I am very impressed. I'm not the type of man to believe in any and everything I come across, but there are just some things you feel, and your knowledge is one of them. I applaud you. My question is, I am what the world calls a homosexual, and I have some serious concerns with my choices and how they fit into society. I truthfully don't have a problem with my sexuality, being that I've been with both males and females, and I like both, but one a little more. I'm just trying to be frank. Please don't take this as disrespect. According to your knowledge, am I to be doomed forever? Cut away from my people, which is God, correct? Why does it feel natural for me if everybody says it isn't? I love my people and I would rather be able to coexist at the highest form of love possible. But is that possible given my sexuality? If my sexuality is seen as going against the nature and God, does that make me a devil? I sincerely hope not. I appreciate any response you can give me. I have searched so long for truth.
My brother, we were all born in this 6,000 year cycle in order to overcome challenges. All of us chose a particular challenge, some more brave than others, that would be ours to experience in defeat. Some people, the braver ones, incarnate into bodies wrecked with paralysis, disease, blindness, etc. Others are born into situations that encourage them to become thieves, murderers, rapists, and so on. All of these are challenges meant to be overcome. That's the only way we can build our character in this age. In past ages, all Black people went through the trials and rigors of initiation, and their character was perfected that way. Presently, the rituals of initiation are no longer publicly available to Black people, so they must perfect their character in other ways, hence the challenges and hardships of life. The same is true of the challenge of homosexuality. Many people are either born with a genetic proclivity that makes them prone to succumb to homosexuality, while others, especially children, are forced into experiences and situations that turn their psyche towards homosexuality. Both these methods of becoming homosexual, i.e., being genetically predisposed to it or being forced by the circumstances of your upbringing, both these ways can be overcome if one wills. If people can overcome the challenges of polio, physical disabilities, blindness, deafness, etc., and become productive members of society who don't add to its decay, so too can one overcome the challenges of homosexuality. To embrace it as if it's a natural thing is to delude oneself. It's like giving in to one's tendencies to commit murder, thievery, etc., however that tendency came about. It's a sign of weak character. In the case of male homosexuals, to overcome it does not mean you have to force yourself to sexually embrace a woman. Not at all. Sex is not an absolute necessity for every member of society. Society will continue even when there are some individuals who don't procreate, as long as they don't do the opposite, which is to encourage racially genocidal behavior. So when a man feels no sexual attraction towards women, he can still lead a happy, loving life without engaging in sex. As a matter of fact, there are definite spiritual benefits to conserving sexual energy. The challenge to you is whether you'll overcome the temptation to give it to it reckless, unnatural sexual pleasures, or whether you're morally strong enough to resist and thereby build a strong character. You may ask, what's the point of building a strong character in this morally corrupt world? Why should you give up your physical pleasure? The reason, brother, is because a moral character is your only key to true love, divine unity. Many homosexuals use the word love to refer to their relationships. This is not love, it's a self deception necessary to justify their failure to rise up to the challenge and overcome the easy temptations of homosexuality. Just like in the case of rape, pedophilia, etc., it takes no effort whatsoever to give into these temptations. They are the ultimate mark of irresponsibility. It takes more strength and courage to get up in the morning and go to work than it does to wait at a dark corner and rob an old lady. Similarly, it's a sign of moral weakness and irresponsibility. To find other weak men and engage in individually unhealthy and societally harmful acts, it's much more responsible to resist the temptation. It's a question of whether or not you're up to the challenge to face it courageously and overcome it, or take the easy way and give in to it without a struggle. As to the question of whether you'll be doomed forever, no, it's impossible for any Black person to be doomed. All the evil acts we engaged in during this 6,000-year cycle were introduced to us by the non-Black races. They were unknown to us before then. We only came here to prove that God can overcome all challenges, whether it's the challenge of slavery or attempted genocide meant to destroy us as a nation, or the challenge of homosexuality meant to morally bankrupt us as individuals. If you don't overcome your challenges here, you'll overcome them in Yahweh's heavens, but at a greater cost. This is not a punishment, but a choice, because ultimately you are one of the 1,000,000,000, 8,000,000 gods, and no one can punish God. Peace, bro.
I appreciate you getting back to me and answering my question in full. Perhaps it will take me a lifetime to consider the weights of my decisions in this world. Keep doing what you are doing, brother, and again, I appreciate the knowledge that you are spreading. I, for one, have benefited.